continue veterans programs and provide money to the federal city of Washington, D.C. Those votes failed, but House Republican leaders have signaled that they will try to pass those measures again today. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has said those piecemeal funding bills would be non-starters in the Senate. We do expect to hear more on the fiscal stalemate when Senator Reid and his Republican counterpart Mitch McConnell offer their leader remarks at the beginning of the session this morning. And now live to the Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
O God, who remains our shelter in the time of storms, we are helpless without your power. Unless you empower our lawmakers, they can see the ideal but not reach it. They can know the right but not do it. They can comprehend their duty but not perform it. They can seek the truth but not fully find it. Dear God, help our lawmakers, enlighten their minds, purify their hearts, and strengthen their wills, enabling them to pass beyond guessing to knowing, beyond doubting to certainty, beyond resolving to doing, and beyond intention to action. We pray in your sacred name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., October 2nd, 2013. To the Senate, on the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Heidi Heitkamp, a senator from the state of North Dakota, to perform the duties of the chair. I'm Patrick J. Leahy, President Pro Tempore.
The Majority Leader.
Following my remarks and those of Senator McConnell, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for debate only until noon, with the time equally divided and controlled. The senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each. Mr. President, it's obvious when you check the press that the Republicans have had a very, very bad week. On the same day that Democrats in Congress delivered quality, affordable health insurance to tens of millions more Americans, Republicans in Congress delivered this nation a government shutdown. Thanks to the Affordable Care Act, yesterday millions of Americans went online to shop for affordable insurance policies on the new marketplace exchanges. Some compare that to when Google went online and the many problems that Google had because they had no idea people were so interested in Google, and there were some problems they had. And of course now we know how people feel about Google. And the same is going to happen with this Affordable Care Act. People have until December to sign up, and they're on again today as they were yesterday, signing up. But thanks to the Republican government shutdown, hundreds of thousands of public servants were sent home without pay. Thanks to the Republican shutdown, tourists lined up outside Red Rock Canyon, outside Las Vegas, where more than 1 million people a year go. But they didn't go there yesterday. There were gates. They couldn't get in. Thanks to the Republican government shutdown, a group of World War II veterans who traveled from Iowa and Mississippi had to break down barricades to visit a Washington, D.C. memorial in their honor, some of them in wheelchairs. Thanks to the Republican government shutdown, 200 sick, really sick, patients, including 30 children, were turned away from the National Institutes of Health Clinic that offers life-saving, and that's an understatement, life-saving new treatments. Most of the children that turned away are suffering from some type of cancer. Madam President, I've read that the modern-day anarchists in the House have been celebrating the shutdown. They can barely contain their glee at having realized a 2010 campaign promise to halt the basic functions of government. This is what the Tea Party spokesperson said, and she is their spokesperson, Michelle Bachmann. You remember, she's the woman that ran for president and was the leading contender for about 4 hours or whatever it was. But anyway, she loves to talk. And here's what she said yesterday, quote, "It's exactly what we wanted and we got it," end of quote. Madam President, you can't make up stuff like that. Can you imagine anyone saying that when we have babies turned away coming for life-saving treatment? It's exactly what we wanted and we got it. It's time for my Republican colleagues to do a gut check, Madam President. Republicans in the House have proposed one cockamamie, can't-pass idea after another the last few days. Defund Obamacare, delay Obamacare, deny preventive health, and to things, they tried that before. They tried it again. They weren't satisfied until they said, and let's also go after women. Things as basic as contraceptives. Or else we'll shut the government down. That's what they said. They're obsessed with Obamacare. Well, now they've gotten their way. They shut down the government. As Bachmann said, it's exactly what we wanted and we got it. But none of their wacky ideas are any closer to becoming law. But instead of reading the writing on the wall, House Republicans have turned to a new bad idea, to cherry-pick a few parts of the government they like and reopen only those parts. Credit for this idea goes, I'm told, to the junior senator from Texas. He goes over to the House and tells them what they should do. He, along with people like Bachmann, are Tea Party. They are anarchists. They are happy. Listen, I've come here and I've talked about how happy they are in hurting government. And we now have them speaking out openly. It's exactly what we wanted and we got it. But I do have a little bit of advice for my Republican colleagues in the House. When your latest brilliant plan came from the same person who proposed the dumbest idea ever, according to one of his own Senate Republicans here, I would think it's a sign you're on the wrong track. It's time for Republicans to stop throwing one crazy idea after another at the wall in hopes that something will stick. Nothing is stuck. There's been a sensible plan to reopen the government, right in front of House Republicans all along. Clean, 6-week resolution that opens government today, and we passed it in the Senate last week. I believe reasonable Republicans, I hope, are desperately looking for a way out, and that's what all the newspapers say today, all the news reports. Each day, a couple more come forward. I don't blame them for looking for a way out. These piecemeal bills, they're not a way out. Obama administration already promised to veto them, so they obviously aren't the answer. Reopening only parts of the government that they like isn't a responsible solution. The Senate already has a plan to reopen government while we work out our budget differences. Open the government, we passed. Based on the resolution we passed last week, I'm sorry. If Republicans really want to reopen the government, they should just go ahead and reopen the government. They've had that power all along. Once they do that, we'll be happy to appoint conferees, work out our long-term budget priorities with the House. Let's go to conference. We've talked about it. Patty Murray's been here 18 times to talk about it. We shouldn't be fighting over a 6-week stopgap budget bill. We should be working out our long-term fiscal issues. Americans are tired of this type of knockdown, drag-out debt fights, which cost our economy billions of dollars. The way to put our nation on sound fiscal footing is to set sensible policy through regular order, the legislative process, not to extort concessions through dangerous hostage-taking. First, Republicans must reopen the government. The next move is to go to conference and set our minds on reaching a reasonable compromise. Right now, Republicans led by John Boehner are the only thing standing between Congress and compromise, and I would suggest he stop taking advice from Bachmann and Cruz. Unfortunately, it seems that some of the Republican conference are simply too mad at me personally, too obsessed with getting me personally, getting me to back down from doing what most America believes is the right thing. National Review said yesterday that I was the villain of villains. John Boehner could rail up the government this morning if he wanted to, but he's too obsessed with beating the villain of villains, and obviously too afraid of the Tea Party to do the right thing for the country. When I read this yesterday, I said, well, you know, villain, be careful the words you choose. I mean, gee, no one likes to be called a villain. So I looked it up in the dictionary. Uncouth person. Well, I acknowledge, Madam President, I probably wasn't born in a place that most people would like to be born in. I wasn't raised the way most people like to be born. But I would hope over the years that I'm not uncouth. I've tried my best to become part of mainstream society. The other definition is I'm a scoundrel or a criminal. Well, I'm not a criminal. I'm not a scoundrel. So they better get a different definition for me. Well, Madam President, in spite of being the villain of villains, I have some advice and a suggestion. I really do believe there are reasonable Republicans in Congress. They have to, as I said, do a gut check. Understand who they represent. Understand that America is waiting for them to do the right thing. I know they believe in public service, but understand why public service is important. I urge them to think about 30 babies, little kids, who yesterday were brought by their parents to Washington, D.C. for hope. Hope that their little babies and children are not going to die, that they can get life-saving treatment. They were turned away. So I urge them to do the right thing. I urge them to join us to reopen the federal government.
Madam President.
The Republican leader.
Well, if it wasn't clear earlier this week why Republicans were asking to delay Obamacare, it should be pretty clear to everybody this morning. The rollout of this thing made a trip to the DMV look like a good time. The word of the day was glitch, and you could probably explain one or two of these glitches away, maybe three, but not glitches in Nebraska and Maryland and Florida and Wisconsin and Illinois and Kentucky. Not glitches all across the country. Kentuckians who tried to log in yesterday got a message that read, server error. Let me translate that. It didn't work. I mean, if the plural of anecdote is data, it seems to me the plural of glitch has to be systemic failure. This is the law that Washington Democrats were so adamant about unveiling yesterday, they were willing to shut down the government over it. Instead of agreeing to a couple of common-sense proposals related to this law, they stuck to their absolutist position, 100% of Obamacare, when and how they want it, no matter what. This, of course, unless the President thinks you're one of the chosen few who deserves a special break. So basically, Washington Democrats shut down the government because they didn't think middle-class Americans deserve the same kind of treatment as their employers, and because they didn't think Congress should have to follow the same rules on Obamacare exchanges as everybody else. These were fair things to ask for. They were reasonable. And if the Democrats who run Washington could have brought themselves to that sensible position, they would have voted to keep the government open. But in the end, they got their shutdown, which they apparently think will help them politically. And they held on to their absolutist position on Obamacare regardless of the consequences for American families. And 2 days into this thing, they still refuse to budge. The President reiterated again yesterday he's not interested in talking. Majority Leader made it clear he's not interested in talking either. He shot down just about every attempt to engage in serious discussions with the House or anyone else for that matter. Look, this week Washington Democrats had a choice: defend basic principles of fairness when it comes to Obamacare, or shut down the government. They chose the latter. It was a wrong decision in my view, and it's time for them to start finding solutions, to start talking and put the interests of their constituents ahead of the interests of their party.
Madam President.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will be in a period of morning business for debate until 12 noon, with time equally divided and controlled between two leaders or their designees, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Madam President.
The majority whip.
Madam President, there were two headlines in most of the major newspapers across the United States this morning. I saw it in Financial Times as well as the Wall Street Journal. And the headlines noted, Americans flock to insurance exchanges. Americans flock to insurance exchanges. It was the first day when we had the rollout of the website where uninsured Americans had an opportunity to shop. Real competition. A variety of plans. In Illinois, 54 different choices in my home state for uninsured people. This is a dream come true. Most of these people have lived their entire lives either without health insurance or with no choices. A take it or leave it policy that may be worthless when they need it. Situations where many of them never, ever once in their lives were able to be insured when it came to health insurance. There were a lot of reasons for it. Some of them had jobs that paid so little that offered no benefits, and they couldn't afford to buy health insurance. Some of them had pre-existing conditions, perhaps a history of asthma in your family, diabetes, cancer survivors. They couldn't buy health insurance if they wanted to. It wasn't even offered. Yesterday was different. October 1st was different. 2.8 million Americans came on the first day to this website to go shopping for health insurance. What a relief it must have been. In the Chicago papers, they told the story of a man who had just about given up hope because he had a child with a mental illness, and because of that, he could never buy health insurance. He was shopping yesterday. He was disappointed. He wanted to sign up yesterday, but so many people came to this website the first day that it wasn't able to meet all the needs of the people who were shopping or wanted to. It will. There'll be an opportunity, and I'm sure it'll be soon. I can't get over when I hear the Republican leader come to the floor and with barely disguised glee talk about the first day's problems with the Affordable Care Act. There's no question that many Republicans are not only praying for the Affordable Care Act to fail, they're betting on it. You see, none of them voted for it. Not one. Not a single Republican voted for it. And they are frightened. Frightened at what is to come when the verdict of history comes down on this program. And I think I know what the verdict will be. There'll be some bumps in the road, glitches maybe, some problems with the website. But in the end, the American people understand the fundamental fairness of the Affordable Care Act. The fundamental fairness that said, yes, we have a right as Americans to health care protection. And I believe we do and we should. I've lived a life, a good one, but I had a moment in that life when I had no health insurance. Brand new father with a brand new baby with medical challenges and no health insurance. I've never felt more helpless in my life, praying that my little girl would get the best when I didn't have health insurance. Now multiply that times 40 million uninsured Americans, and you understand what's at stake. Those on the other side who are just opposed to affordable care don't want to extend a helping hand of health insurance to those who have been denied for years. They don't have anything to replace it with. Stick with the current free market system. Well, 40 million Americans have been left behind with this current system. That's why I supported the Affordable Care Act. That's why the President is fighting for the Affordable Care Act. And that's why we have to continue to fight every single day to make sure it is not defunded, as the Republicans tried to do just a few days ago, to make sure that the coverage for individuals is not delayed, as the Republicans tried to do just a few days ago. No, we've got to fight to make sure Americans have this chance. There is no turning back when it comes to offering health insurance to families that desperately need them. So what are the Republicans prepared to bet on this wager to end Affordable Care Act and health care reform? They're willing to bet the federal government. They're willing to shut it down over the Affordable Care Act. Harry Reid, our Democratic leader, told the story that was reported in the Wall Street Journal at the National Institutes of Health, not far from here, just in the near suburbs of Maryland. This is a beacon of hope. This is where some of the most important medical research in the world is taking place. And the head of that, Dr. Francis Collins, may be one of the most extraordinary people who's ever been involved in public service. He was head of the National Genome Project, and they said it would probably take him 5, 6, 8 years. He was so good and had so much talent to turn to that he did it in a very brief period of time, mapping the human genome. And in doing so, started opening doors to understanding and knowledge and finding cures. And he took that back to the NIH, and they apply it every single day to save lives and find cures. But now, for the second day in a row, 3/4 of the scientists and doctors and researchers at the NIH sit at home, unable to engage in this critically important research, unable to find the new drugs, the new surgeries, the new medical devices, the new procedures to save lives. That's part of the Republican government shutdown. Oh, they may congratulate themselves on finally bringing this government to its knees, but they have to take responsibility for what they have done as well. They have shut down the National Institutes of Health. They have shut down the medical research. And, Madam President, it's worse. Because you see, the toughest medical cases in America end up at the doorstep of NIH. The most challenging medical conditions, families and people who've just about given up hope think there's one last place to go, the NIH, the very best. Yesterday, Dr. Francis Collins announced that 200 people who would have started clinical trials this week at the NIH were turned away because of the government shutdown. 200. And within that population of 200, 30 children, most of them cancer victims. Imagine for a moment that you're the mother or father of a child diagnosed with cancer. You have one last hope, the National Institutes of Health. It may be a great personal sacrifice for you and your family to pick up and come out here, but you're going to do it. It's your baby. And you come to the front door of the NIH and there's a sign that says, this agency is closed. Why is it closed? Some national emergency, some disaster, some crisis? No. A manufactured political temper tantrum coming from the Tea Party, Speaker Boehner, and those who believe this is the right way to go. Excuse me if this example is so stark, but I haven't even gotten into the details. I would invite any family that's been a victim of this government shutdown at NIH or any other medical facility, come to my Facebook page, come to my Twitter account, send me a message and tell me your story. I want to come to the floor and tell that story too. You shouldn't disappear into the shadows as we make all this noise over this political debate. You ought to be front and center. Please share your story if you wish. I know it's a matter of privacy and confidentiality, and if you don't, I certainly understand. But that's what it's come down to. They said yesterday, for example, in the House, oh, we're going to open the Veterans Administration. Senator Cruz has made a decision. He's going to pick and choose the agencies to reopen. We'll start with the Veterans Administration. In other words, as former Speaker Pelosi said, they're going to release one hostage at a time when it comes to our federal government. But you see, what Senator Cruz and the Tea Party Republicans failed to acknowledge is of the 800,000 federal employees that have been furloughed, over 500,000 of them are veterans. They're out of work. If you really care for the veterans, put this government back to work. Put over 500,000 veterans working for our federal government back to work. Incidentally, 1 out of 4 of them are disabled. Disabled veterans. Put off the payroll, furloughed, no promise that they'll ever be paid, because of this Tea Party government shutdown. Madam President, we have serious challenges facing America, but the first thing we need to do is to reopen this government now. Now. There's no excuses. Speaker Boehner sits there with a bill that he could bring before the House by 11 o'clock this morning. They could vote on it, and the word would go out before noon that the government is reopened. That's how quickly he can act. It's there. But he won't call it for a vote. What is he afraid of? Why wouldn't he call this measure for a vote in the House? I'll tell you why. He knows it will pass because every Democrat will vote for it, and moderate Republicans will step up and vote for it. The only hope we have to end this Tea Party Republican crisis is if moderate Republicans will step forward now and say, we're not part of this strategy. We want this government open. We're prepared to face all the challenges that follow, but we're not going to move forward at the expense of patients coming to the National Institutes of Health. It's only one example. There are many more just like it. I will just say this in closing. Once again, the Republican leaders come to the floor and mentioned the fact that members of Congress will be in the insurance exchanges, the same exchanges that were advertised yesterday for the first time. Just a moment of reflection in history. We are in the insurance exchanges because of an amendment offered by a Republican senator, Senator Grassley, an amendment which was part of the Affordable Care Act, which passed. And we will be buying insurance, the same kinds of policies, exactly the same kinds of policies offered to all Americans on the exchanges. No special favors for a member of Congress. Now we hear an objection from Senator McConnell to the employer's contribution for our staff and for members of Congress. Over half of the American people get their health insurance through their place of employment. Virtually all of them have employers' contributions that help them pay their monthly premiums. Same thing is true for federal employees. Same thing is true for members of Congress. The same thing will be true when it comes to the insurance exchanges. There's no special treatment of members of Congress. This notion that you can't have an employer's contribution when it comes to the insurance exchanges, flat out wrong. A business with fewer than 50 employees, for example, can send their employees to the exchanges and continue to contribute for their premiums. It's already accepted under law, so there's no special treatment in this. It's just another diversion, trying to find ways to create chaos and uncertainty when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. That is the message of the Republican Party. And unfortunately, it's being delivered at the expense of 800,000 furloughed federal employees, the services this government offers, and 200 people turned away this week for clinical trials at the National Institutes of Health. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Republican whip.
Madam President, I've listened with great interest at the comments of the distinguished Deputy Democratic Majority Leader. And I was reminded of a radio commentator who's perhaps not as remembered as frequently now, but when I grew up, he had a radio show where when he started out, he would say, "And now for the rest of the story." So I'd like to offer the rest of the story. I listened as Senator Durbin talked about the fact that the National Institutes of Health is not open for business. Well, the good news is that Republicans and Democrats both agree that we should reopen the National Institutes of Health. And in fact, it's my understanding that the House of Representatives will pass a bill perhaps as early as today and send it over here to the United States Senate. And I hope that Senator Reid, unlike over the last few days where he has killed every reasonable offer by the House of Representatives, that he will reconsider and he will not kill that funding for the National Institutes of Health during this partial government shutdown. So there's some other areas where I think we could work together. Senator Reid knew that Republicans were going to come to the floor and try to make sure that our uniformed military continued to get their full pay on time during this impasse in Congress. And like for funding our troops, our uniformed military, on a timely basis in full during this impasse. But this has been sort of a surreal experience in so many ways because my friends on the other side of the aisle have been making what I consider to be some very strange arguments very strange arguments. The argument they've been making is that President Obama's health care law, the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, is untouchable, and that our efforts to modify it in any way are illegitimate, or their favorite word is extreme, or the product of some effort by the Tea Party Republicans, or some other disparaging connotation. Now, I'm not sure exactly how to respond except to say this. If Obamacare is untouchable, if Obamacare is perfect, if we can't change one word and one sentence about Obamacare, then you need to tell the Obama administration. After all, since 2010, the administration has granted more than 1,000 different waivers to its friends and political allies. It suspended all work on a large portion of Obamacare known as the Class Act. It's delayed Obamacare's basic health program and delayed the employer mandate. And when we try to delay the individual mandate so that average Americans get the same sort of consideration from this administration that employers get, that businesses get, we were told this is an unreasonable request. Senator Reid tabled that, in essence killing that provision rather than taking it up and embracing it and say, you know what, if employers get a break for a year, then let's give average Americans a break. The Obama administration has likewise delayed the eligibility verification for the exchanges. It started yesterday. In other words, you can apply for one of these insurance exchanges, but you don't have to prove what your income is. If there's a bigger open invitation for fraud, I'm not aware of what it might be. But that's what the Obama administration has done, delayed the eligibility verification for the Obama exchanges. And they delayed the cap on out-of-pocket expenses. In short, the Obama administration has, by its very actions, demonstrated that Obamacare is not perfect, that itself has made, the administration itself, by its own actions, has acknowledged that Obamacare is not ready for prime time. Now, this became painfully obvious to millions of Americans yesterday when the Obamacare exchanges encountered widespread problems on its first day of operation. Now, the President calls these glitches. Glitches, a nice poll-tested, fairly benign-sounding word. But these were systemic failures of the Obamacare exchanges yesterday when they came online, obviously not ready for prime time. Meanwhile, there have been other changes in this perfect, inviolable, can't change a word Obamacare. The Supreme Court, while we're certainly acknowledged, has upheld major portions of Obamacare, it's important to remember that it declared a major piece of the law, the compulsory expansion of Medicaid, unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. Incompatible with our fundamental law of the land. Does that sound like a law that's perfect, can't be changed? Well, let me give you another example. During the Obamacare debate, Democrats voted in a party-line vote to impose a medical device tax on medical device manufacturers. It's not based on their income. It's based on their gross receipts, how much money comes in the door, before they even deduct their costs of doing business and their overhead. So they would actually have to pay taxes without it generating any net income because of the nature of this tax. This is a job-killing tax. I've had constituents come into my office and say, we have operations in Costa Rica, so we're going to have to move jobs we would create in Dallas to Costa Rica because of this job-killing medical device tax. And you know what? Medical devices are some of the most innovative part of our health care system. How better to discourage medical innovation and life-saving discoveries and manufacturers than to impose this gross receipts tax on medical device taxes? Now, that's not just my opinion. Last time we had a debate on the budget resolution, 79 senators voted against the medical device tax because they realized it was a terrible mistake. In this law that we're told today and yesterday and the day before is perfect in every way, wouldn't change a thing. And yet Senate Democrats are now lining up to repeal the medical device tax. And yet, somehow, in a schizophrenia I don't quite understand, other Democrats are saying an attempt to do that would represent partisan extremism. Well, which is it? I think the American people know. I'm not really sure exactly how our friends on the other side of the aisle define extremism. But I'd submit to you that very few extreme ideas gain the support of 79 senators in the United States Senate on a bipartisan basis. How is it extreme to delay Obamacare's individual mandate when the administration has unilaterally done the same thing for businesses? How is it extreme to ask members of Congress to live by the same laws that apply to everyone else? The Majority Leader, Senator Reid, tabled 2 amendments to the continuing resolution that would change this special carve-out for Congress that would provide a delay of the individual mandate for average Americans like the administration has already done for businesses. And we're told that that's extreme, that somehow we're the ones that caused the government shutdown. I'm absolutely convinced that President Obama and Harry Reid think that this shutdown's the best thing that ever happened to them politically in recent memory. And so rather than come out and tell sympathetic stories about what's happening at NIH, let's work together to mitigate some of the hardship and inconvenience. Let's talk about working through this impasse. Why can't we get the President of the United States to do what he apparently, reportedly, intended to do in the first place, which is to convene a meeting at the White House of Republicans and Democrats to work through this? They're not just refusing to make big compromises, they're refusing any compromise, my way or the highway. They won't even agree to keep the war memorials open for our honor flights that are coming to Washington, D.C. I would urge the Majority Leader and President Obama to join with us in passing a bill today that would keep our war memorials open. My father was a World War II veteran. He's dead now, but he was a B-17 pilot in World War II. On his 26th bombing mission, he was shot down and captured as a prisoner of war. My father-in-law landed on Utah Beach the second day of the Normandy invasion. He's 95 years old now. His mind's still sharp, his body not quite what it used to be, and he would love nothing better than to come to Washington, D.C. on one of these honor flights, but unfortunately his health won't allow him to do it. The chairman of the Honor Flight Network, James McLaughlin, has said that it is beyond belief that those deserving men and women who've waited decades to see their memorials and selected the trip of a lifetime to discover they may not be able to see their memorial. And for many of them, Madam Chairman, Madam President, this may be the last time they get during their lifetime. So I would ask for the President to cancel his trip to Asia that he's leaving on Saturday, to overrule Senator Reid and convene that meeting at the White House, and to come together to try to work through some of these differences. We can fund NIH. We could do it today if Senator Reid and President Obama would allow it. But no, instead, we're told it's my way or the highway, and we actually like this shutdown, they're saying to themselves, because they think they're winning politically. But they're not winning politically when the American people are the net losers.
Senator from New York.
This morning sometimes stretches credulity. Who shut down the government? Was it Harry Reid? No, he kept passing messages to keep the government going. Was it Barack Obama? No. We all know who it was. It was the small band of Tea Party people in the House. It was his junior colleague in the Senate, Ted Cruz, who had the idea of shutting down the government. As Leader Reid said yesterday, we're not in 1984. Truth has some degree of credulity here. For my colleague from Texas to get up and say, Harry Reid and Barack Obama open up the government when his junior colleague led the charge to shut it down, when the cries of the Tea Party are shut it down, and we are desperately trying to keep it open, it makes no sense, and it's not going to wash. One of the amazing things about our politics, Madam President, is how rhetoric has become so detached from reality. And then you have talk radio and some of the networks, Fox News, who repeat it. I saw a cartoon in the New York Post yesterday saying that senators and congressmen are exempt from Obamacare. It's just not true. We are part of Obamacare, and we will join the exchange. I will, and so will my colleagues. That's what they have to do. But it doesn't even matter. The hard right is so angry at Obamacare and, frankly, at President Obama and the fact that he just trounced them in 2012 on an election that was run on their issues, that they are so angry and white-hot that their rhetoric just becomes totally detached from reality and totally detached from the truth. I feel bad for the veterans who couldn't get to the memorial. Why was the government shut down? Because Speaker Boehner in the House wouldn't keep it open. After Senator Cornyn and so many other Republicans paved the way for us to open up the government with the vote to allow us to go forward. That got 25 Republicans, even though Ted Cruz, his junior colleague, were urging him not to vote that way. That was the right vote. We know that. He knew, Senator Cornyn did, to his credit, that shutting down the government was a bad thing. So on the one procedural vote that mattered, where he could have had the Senate say shut down the government, he voted the other way. So, Madam President, the real onus here is on Speaker Boehner. The entire focus of this debate should be on Speaker Boehner. Now, some might say it should be on Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz, the senator from Texas. Some might say it should be on the 30 or 40 hardline Tea Party people in the House. But in my view, it is the Speaker of the House who has the responsibility not to listen to a small faction of his party when so much is at stake. Instead, Speaker Boehner seems to be listening to the junior senator from Texas. The junior senator of Texas has become the de facto Speaker of the House. If he says jump, the House jumps. The junior senator wanted the House to embark on a crusade to defund Obamacare. So the Speaker, Speaker Boehner, did it. The junior senator from Texas told the House to delay Obamacare for a year. So the Speaker, Speaker Boehner, did it. And now this junior senator from Texas is telling the House to pass piecemeal bills in a cynical attempt to pit important programs against each other. And now the Speaker is trying to do just that. Senator Cruz has driven Speaker Boehner to pit kids who should be enrolled in Head Start against kids who should be enrolled in cancer trials. He's driven the Speaker to pit families who want to visit the Statue of Liberty against families who own a small business and need help from the SBA. He's pitted research in cancer against help for our veterans. It's a cynical strategy. And like all the others, that they have sent us and that have failed, as these will fail today, it has one purpose: not to get anything done, but to try to wriggle out of this view that they've shut down the government. Senator Cornyn's rhetoric won't work. It's too far detached from reality. So they try to come up, Speaker Boehner tries to come up with these gizmos, these gimmicks, these legislative ploys to say, hey, I'm trying to do something. At the same time, when he's in a vice-lock grip of the Tea Party members of his House who are taking their orders from the junior senator from Texas. And so there's a simple way to open up the government. I'd say that to my friend, and he is my friend, Senator Cornyn of Texas, and my other colleagues on the Republican side in the House. There's a bill sitting there waiting for a vote. It'll open up NIH. It'll open up the Veterans Administration. It'll open up the World War II Memorial. It will open up the Statue of Liberty so the guy with the little sandwich shop right by that Statue of Liberty gets some business back. Because make no mistake about it, Madam President, this crisis doesn't just hurt, quote, the federal government. It doesn't even just hurt 800,000 families who aren't getting their paychecks and who depend on them. That's not abstract. It hurts lots of private sector people as well, whether they be the construction worker building a road using federal dollars, or the veteran waiting for that disability claim to come through, or the guy with the sandwich shop next to this closed Statue of Liberty who's making no sales. It's not abstract. I get a little resentful when I hear my colleagues talk about the federal government as if it's some big ogre. Shut it down. And by the way, if you watched Rachel Maddow the other night, she had a variety of Tea Party congressmen running for the Congress in 2010 who said they're going to shut the government down. I saw one, I think it was Congressman Mulvaney of South Carolina. He said, when I get to Congress, I'm going to shut the government down. And the Tea Party audience cheered and said, shut it down. This is even before they had a plan. I think their real goal, because they hate the federal government so much, that's their goal, to shut it down, and Obamacare is an excuse. But in any case, mainstream Republicans know that shutting the government down is a bad thing and know that they are indeed paying a political price. So Speaker Boehner should follow the majority of his party. Stop being scared of the Tea Party. He'll face them down easily in a challenge for Speaker. Speaker Boehner knows, as the National Review said this morning, that more than 100 House Republicans would vote for our bill to reopen the government if he put it on the floor. Instead, Republicans are wasting time on political stunts and asking to go to conference on a short-term CR. Well, in conclusion, Madam President, the Republicans have this exactly backwards. They say, let's talk, and then maybe we'll open up the government. They ought to say, we'll open up the government, and then we can talk. If Republicans would simply switch all of the lights back on, allow hundreds of thousands of furloughed federal employees to go back to work, allow cancer research to continue, veterans to get their disability claims, kids to go back into Head Start, we can have a discussion about the budget, which they've rejected 18 times. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Washington.
Madam President, I woke up this morning feeling like I think most Americans feel today, pretty disappointed in the antics of Washington, D.C. As my colleague from New York just pointed out, we all know why we're here. Speaker Boehner and the Republicans in the House demanded a ransom in order to keep our government open. And their ransom was to repeal a law that they do not support, Obamacare. And they made it very clear that government was going to shut down, and my constituents in Washington State, who were supposed to go to work today, thousands of them, aren't going to get their paycheck because of that ransom. They made it very clear that they were not going to open government over a policy that they cared passionately about. Well, Madam President, I just have to say, I started my morning this morning talking to a number of business people involved in the construction industry in the state of Washington. They told me this uncertainty, this crisis, this shutdown of government is impacting their small businesses at home in the state of Washington. Because who's going to sign a contract to build something new when it's so unclear where our economy is going to be as a result of this shutdown and the looming debt ceiling crisis? So they're seeing a real contraction in their own businesses right down, not because of a government funding of a program or anything else that's long going or in dispute, but because of this shutdown today. Just a few minutes ago, on the other end of the spectrum, I talked to some moms and dads in Head Start from my home state of Washington. A young mom from Bremerton, Washington, who has a 2-year-old daughter, who told us that a few years ago she was on the streets, homeless, a victim of an abusive partner, and because of Head Start and the wraparound services they provided, found her a place to stay, got her and her child involved in early childhood education, and because of that support and that start as a Head Start mom, early Head Start mom, she now, 2 years later, is back at school, working on her degree, her daughter's doing well, and she's back on track. Thousands of moms and dads like that exist across the country today, a helping hand at the right moment with the right program. But because of sequestration, and now because of the government shutdown, we're telling moms and dads like her, sorry, we're not going to be there for you. Now, I happen to be a very passionate advocate for early childhood education. I was a former preschool teacher. I'm using my skills as a preschool teacher right now. I think all of our colleagues would learn a lot from those kinds of skills. No bullying, it's my turn to talk, being reasonable, teaching our child to play well in the sandbox. Those are lessons that we teach in preschool, Madam President. I think we could all learn from that. But I think about that, and I think about those Head Start kids and the children that I taught before and who are being taught now, who are not being taught now because of the sequestration. And what lesson we're giving them? That if I don't get my way right now about a bill that I fought against and voted against, and an election was run and won on, but I lost, and I'm so mad that I'm going to not let you have anything else because I'm just so entrenched in that. That's not a lesson we should teach our kids. And let's look at the other side of that argument. What if I came out here and I said, I am so passionate about funding early childhood education because I know the research and I know what a difference it makes and I know what that investment will do for our country, not just today, but for 10 or 20 years ago. And if I don't get my way to make sure that every child in this country has Head Start, this government's going to shut down. That's not the way we run a country. I adamantly, passionately fight for any cause I believe in. Any legislator can here. But the way you get your way isn't to hold that policy hostage. We have a country that is counting on us to be responsible adults, to come to the table, to work out our disagreements between each other, and they are large. There is no doubt about that. But you don't do it by hurting every family, every neighborhood, every community, every part of this country by holding this country hostage. Madam President, we have a responsibility. It's to pass a clean continuing resolution. It's to get our government working again. It's to tell people they're going to get their paychecks. We're going to responsibly do that, and then we, as members of Congress, are going to take our differences to a negotiating table and hammer them out. I may want $1 million for something. My House counterparts may say no. We may meet in the middle. I may have to say, geez, I didn't get my way. Okay, you got yours. That's what you do in a conference committee. You don't do it by holding your country hostage. So we say to Speaker Boehner today, open up the government. Let everybody go back to work. Don't hold our economy hostage. And we will then sit down with you and work out our agreements. As the presiding officer knows, we have asked 18 times now to do. and have been told, no, we're not going to let you go to that negotiating table. We're not going to let you talk, by the same people who wanted this government shut down. So, Madam President, I find myself in a very odd place where we have a country that is closed to business. We're sending a very bad message and lesson to the children of this country that we can't work and play well together, that we can't even disagree together in an admirable way. And we're doing it while people are getting hurt. Speaker Boehner, open up the country again, open up our economy again, and agree to go work out our differences like responsible adults should do. Madam President, my understanding is, after trying all kinds of different ways to appease some of his members with all kinds of different proposals, the latest proposal is to send us over piecemeal pieces of legislation. Well, okay, we feel bad about the veterans, and we all do. I am the biggest veteran advocate in here. We'll take care of them now. And, oh, gosh, some of our constituents are mad because they've flown out here and the national museums aren't open, so we'll open those. And then, you know, on and on and on, whatever the cause of the day is. I guarantee you, Madam President, that if we began to pass those piecemeal pieces of legislation, cause of the day, my moms and dads in Head Start would be at the end of the line and would never get funded. I'm standing up for them today and say, you're first in line too. We're all in this together. We need the government open, all of our agencies. Everybody gets a chance and an opportunity in this country, and we're going to stick together and say to Speaker Boehner, pass a clean CR, and then allow this country and this government and this American way of life to function as our forefathers said, by sitting down at a negotiating table and working out our differences. It's what I've asked for as chair of the Budget Committee 18 times now. It's what we need to say we're going to do again, but not while our country's shut down, not while my families in Head Start are held hostage, not while our small businesses are held hostage, not while everybody in this country is looking at us wondering how we have ever gotten to this. Open up the government and let us be responsible legislators. It's what I came here to do. I certainly know it's what the presiding officer came to do. And let's tell the kids in this country who are watching us today that this country can function, we can work like adults, and we have a responsibility to do that here and abroad. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.
Well, on this, the second day of the federal government shutdown, Congress continues to struggle to find ways to overcome the standoff. The House acted yesterday in trying to pass 3 piecemeal funding bills to reopen national parks and memorials, to continue veterans programs, and provide money to Washington, D.C. None of those measures was approved yesterday, but those bills are on the House agenda again today. The White House has issued a statement opposing this approach to settling the funding impasse. It says, in part, consideration of appropriations bills in a piecemeal fashion is not a serious or responsible way to run the United States government. Instead of opening up a few government functions, the House of Representatives should reopen all of the government. Along with working behind the scenes on temporary government funding legislation on the Senate agenda for later today, we expect debate and votes on 2 judicial nominations. Live coverage here on C-SPAN 2 as we await further debate on the Senate floor.